This is Steven Diego, and you're now tuned in to Breaking Down the Breakdown. On today's episode, I'm going to talk about my journey with OCD. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Breaking Down the Breakdown. I said that like audition. I'm sorry. To another. Oh my God, I just cannot speak today. I'm so sorry, y'all. Actually, when can I ever, right? Thank you for being here. This is a special episode for me because it is my birthday. I turned 36. Now, for those of y'all who are watching this on YouTube, yes, I know. I'm getting there. I know. I'm scared. Maybe this is why I didn't turn on all the lights, you know? I am also sorry if there is a little humming sound. It is very hot right now in Toronto. May not be hot outside, but in my room, oh my goodness. My AC is broken. Only a fan is working, so I couldn't cool the room before. Anyways, point is, I'm sorry if there's a little bit of background noise, but I'm just going to get right to it. Today's episode, for me, I realized I actually haven't done a check-in in a very long time with my own mental health disorder. And, you know, I think it would be nice to just kind of take a look back and see just how far I've come, you know, or how little I've progressed. I still progressed, though, and I know that. It took 4 years to do X, Y, and Z. You know what? I am glad I'm able to do X, Y, and Z. And that is the whole point of today's episode. Just to recap, I started this podcast because I was diagnosed with Harm OCD. Now, for those of you who don't know what Harm OCD is, might not actually know what OCD entails, I'm just going to explain my version of it. For me, I went into psychosis after consuming large amounts of pot brownies. Definitely my fault. I knew they were pot brownies, forgot about them, and ingested them a lot. And it sent me into oblivion. And it's something that lives rent-free in my head, the things that I saw when I was in my trip. And it haunts me, obviously, because, you know, I saw myself killing my roommates and my friends, my best friends. Not fun. Definitely not fun to have a trip like that. Very interesting experience that night. I remember coming in and out of it. And I remember telling them, you know, like, close the windows. I don't want the neighbors to hear this. And I'm like, please keep holding me down. I don't want to hurt any of you. I will never forget that. I will never forget kind of regaining consciousness from whatever trip that was. And to just make sure that they were safe. Anyway, it's a very scary thing that happened to me. And honestly, shout out to Leaf, like, and Mikey for being there. Because I don't think I would be here if they weren't there. So yeah, anyways, now, you know, let me just fast forward a little bit. So after that whole event happened, right, I started getting intrusive thoughts that were very violent. Now, I've always had intrusive thoughts growing up. I just never knew what they were. And you may be in the same boat. You know, intrusive thoughts are thoughts that make no sense, that would want you to do things that would be normally out of the ordinary. And that could potentially hurt you or others. Or, you know, not just physically, but like, you know, maybe humiliating people, or doesn't matter. Just something that is out of your character, right? That's what OCD does. Only you obsess over it and it becomes a compulsion. The compulsion is not the thought. I mean, it is an obsessive thought. The compulsion happens with the actions that you do to prevent these thoughts from coming back, that you then realize you can't ever stop because you feel like the only way to stop it is to do that compulsion, and it stops it for a few minutes and it comes back. You see, it's a cycle, right? So that is why it's called obsessive compulsive disorder. In my case, I didn't know how to deal with the intrusive thoughts of I'm going to go kill people or hurt people. And it kept sending me into a state of panic, and I would have panic attacks almost on the daily, until one night I couldn't take it anymore and decided to check myself into the ER, because I know that that hospital had a mental health facility. And, the rest was history, right? That's when they realized something was off with me. And it was funny because they didn't even know it was OCD, right? Like I've said it multiple times before. I was misdiagnosed at first. I only found out it was OCD a month and a half to 2 months after I got discharged, and it was all through my own doing. I was doing my research because I wanted to get better, and realized that it might not have been acute psychotic disorder. A brief acute psychotic disorder was what I was diagnosed with at first, and it wasn't that at all. It was OCD, and we didn't know. But now that we do know, right? Certain key takeaways from my experiences then to now, I realized, and this is true for a lot of people out there who are suffering, there comes a moment where it's hard to live life. I mean, you don't have to be suffering from mental health disorder to realize it's hard to live life, right? But my point is, especially if you are suffering with something like that, it's really hard to live life if you don't have a good support system. I have been blessed with the fact that I have people willing to talk to me. I have people willing to check up on me. And it didn't feel that way for a while because of my OCD, because I decided to cut people off because I was scared that if I talked to them, I would think of ways to kill them. Which almost immediately it happens, right? I do it with strangers. I do it with anybody, right? That's just what my OCD does. And I didn't want that because that's painful for me. So I didn't want to talk to anyone at all. Didn't want to see anybody. If people wanted to talk to me, it would have to be only on the phone or through text. I didn't want to see anything. I stopped listening to music because it had the words blood, kill, hurt, doesn't matter. Any words would trigger it. And despite all this, I had people who still constantly made sure I was okay. So shout out to all of y'all. There's a lot of people. I can't really name names. There's a lot of them. And, looking back, I really couldn't have made it without them. And it's because it made me miss them. I missed being able to do things with people, to hang out with people, right? To even just play games online, to just interact without me feeling that kind of, way about it. And I had to put in the work. And I remember I would ask my therapist constantly when I was going to get better. And I remember he told me 6 months. 6 months came, still the same thing. I remember how mad I was. And that's when he, told me OCD was a forever thing. It was never going to go away. But I needed to really live in the moment at that point and realize where I am. Are the thoughts still persistent? Yes. But how am I actually doing with managing these thoughts? And that was the very first time that I realized it may not have seemed like I was making much progress. But noticing that I was interacting with people more, noticing that, one of the biggest things I almost omitted was my compulsion with how I dealt with the thoughts afterwards. I would actually get notebooks upon notebooks upon notebooks of me writing, saying that I'm not a bad person. I never once hurt animals or people. I would never want to do that. I love people, I love my friends, I love God, I love my family, I love the world, I love anything that I could think of that I loved, I would put in that notebook. and I would sign off because I thought journaling does help, right? In my case, unfortunately, I turned journaling into my compulsion. I wasn't journaling anymore at this point. I was just repeating things that I would say in my head to help keep the thoughts go away. Keep the thoughts go away. To help keep the thoughts from going back. Sorry. To help them go away. And that was a huge, I don't want to say mistake, but it was kind of a mistake because it made it harder for me now to journal properly without being tempted to write compulsions. And I have 4 stacks of notebooks filled with the same thing. Different days, sometimes same day, different hour. Just me constantly saying, I love people, I love God, I love my family, I love animals, I love food. And I would always sign it off with I would never hurt anyone. It was a very hard time for me. It's making me choked up, sorry. I've never actually had to look back and just see how far I've come, with it. Sorry, I'm a little emotional. Because I'm really proud of myself. And if you guys are in the same shoes right now, I really want you to take a look back at how bad it used to be. And look at how bad it still is. But how you're managing it now. Look at the things that you're able to do now that you weren't before, out of fear in the past. That now it's like you don't give a fuck anymore. It's wild because people don't celebrate these wins because they think, well, I'm still not normal, or I still deal with it. Yeah, you do still deal with it, and you might still deal with it for the rest of your life. But take a look at how much you have improved your own quality of life because you decided not to give up. You knew what life was like before this. And as much as you want to go back to your life prior to this, why would you want to do that? And I mean that, right? A lot of people, they think, oh, I'm trying to work back to be able to do things I used to do. You can do better. These experiences can actually help turn you into a better person, a better version of yourself. We all have our growth. And I'm not sitting here saying it's easy. It's really not. But this is the point of this conversation. For those of you who haven't had the chance to just sit down and take a look back at your journey, please do that right now. If you realize that, you haven't really come that far from where you were, that's okay. Because you're still trying, aren't you? And that's all that matters. It took me 4 years to get to where I am now. 4 years. One of the biggest things that I stopped doing was drinking, which, by the way, it's bad to drink anyway. But I've always attached the notion of getting drunk to losing control. And I am so afraid of losing control because what if my intrusive thoughts take over and control me in that state? And that scared me from, what? It also scared me from ingesting salt and sugar. Because when I was doing my Dr. Google stuff, which, by the way, while it helped me in some ways, it also really fucked with me. Because there are articles saying, oh, salt can raise your anxieties. Sugar can raise your anxieties. That was the only reason why I lost, 30 pounds in a month? Because I avoided eating. All I would eat was a can of tuna and boiled eggs. And boiled broccoli if I had to. That's all I ate. I barely survived that. I mean, it kind of helped me in that in a sense because during that time I couldn't go to work, right? So I was like, well, this is good. This is a cheap alternative, I guess. At least I don't have to eat sugar anymore or salt. I avoided salt and sugar because I was so scared because I would get constant panic attacks. That's what my OCD would do to me. When my intrusive thoughts start circling in my head over and over and over again, it feels like something trying to tell you like you have to kill, shit like that. I'm sorry, it's really triggering, guys, right? It was like that. It was a constant ta 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 in my head because I didn't know what it was. And so it would send me into this state of panic because I don't want to do anything like that. And so I would start really having a panic attack where I can't breathe. And I would just start lying down on the floor and screaming because I don't know what to do. So imagine having these panic attacks at least 3 times a day, every day, for 3 weeks. Of course you'd be scared of it. You don't want it to happen ever again. So that's why I avoided anything that could contribute to anxieties, right? I was running my life based on what I feared. I avoided so many things because I was afraid. And it wasn't until I actually started reading different books on OCD and things that could help with OCD that I was able to really overcome certain things. One of the biggest things is exposure therapy. It is probably the scariest thing to do, but by golly, you have to do it. That is the one thing for me in these past 4 years. If you were to ask me, what is the one thing you did that allowed you to actually live life the way you want to while dealing with OCD and the voices in your head, it was that. Anytime my fears were illogical, unreasonable, I would do it. There were moments where I would be downstairs and I want to make food and I have to, chop vegetables and meat, and my roommates were downstairs. I wouldn't do it because I was afraid that there's a visual that would happen in my head where I see myself grabbing a knife and stabbing everyone. Or I see myself sometimes, I avoided cooking large meals or meals for people because I would picture myself putting things in the food and poisoning everyone. And I avoided that. It made me forget who was truly in control. And exposure therapy allowed me to get that control back. It was so uncomfortable. And there are certain moments where I would cry because I was so scared. But it also teaches you that your fears, your thoughts are just thoughts. And that's like the main foundation of, dealing with OCD. These are just thoughts. You can have 10,000 thoughts in a day. And majority of those thoughts, you don't conjure up those thoughts. They just come in. You have no control over that. But you have control over your emotions and your reactions to it. And so I was big on that. I was banking on that. And you know what? It worked. I was afraid to be intimate with people because I was scared I was going to hurt them. I went and I got intimate with people. I was afraid that if I drank again, ungodly things would happen. Let me tell you, I drank again. Ungodly things did happen, but not like that. It was ungodly things I used to do when I used to be a drunk, right? It was just me stripping or like me being, like loud and obnoxious because in my head I was speaking normally, but outside I was actually talking like, extra decibels out there. I was screaming, right? It's stuff like that. A lot of you will listen to this and be like, oh my God, isn't that so risky? You're risking other people's lives just so you can get better. If that is how you took this, then you don't understand OCD at all. You didn't listen to anything I just said. OCD preys on your fear, right? It manifests itself as the worst things you could ever think of for you. For some people, it's hurting themselves, right? For people like me, the worst thing that you can do to a person truly is to, kill them. Or even hurt them physically. Or just hurt them, period, right? There are moments where you're obviously going to hurt each other, like emotionally or whatever. You can't control that. Like, that's, situations, right? But picking up a chair and hitting somebody over the head with it for no reason, even if you're in a fight, okay, you're in a fight, I guess self-defense, whatever. I'm just not big on fights, actually. Even before this, I was never big on fights, right? You will not see me in a brawl. Like, that's just not how I do. I don't like that, right? That's my point. These are things that are so out of my character. And that's what makes you feel that anxiety, because it would replay things you would never even want to happen on repeat. That you start to think, well, why am I thinking about this? Is it because I low-key want to do this? No. There are people who develop OCD over time. And I don't want to say develop it. Like, there's a condition called pandas, in which it just a sudden onset of it that is more common with children, right? But I'm just going to have to say this. Nip it in the bud the moment it starts feeling that way. And remind yourself, it's just a thought. If it comes coming back, it's just a thought. Don't dwell on it. That was one of the first mistakes I made, even before the diagnosis. I remember that. I tried to overanalyze what was going on with me, that it became a habit, and it just significantly just made it worse, right? But the point I'm trying to make here is, in these 4 years, I have done so many things in my life that I actually never would have done prior to my diagnosis. And I mean things for myself. Decisions I've made in the past 4 years I never would have been able to do because I was too afraid to do or make these decisions, right? It's like, pursuing singing, or like my writing my album, right? Putting out my own music, streaming, putting out a podcast, things I never would have done because my intrusive thoughts prior to this would always tell me that it wasn't going to go anywhere. It's a failure. Why would I even start? And I'd believe it. I know we have a lot of us have intrusive thoughts like that. That doesn't mean you have OCD. Intrusive thoughts are, very common with people. They just don't know what it's called. But this is also how I knew I've been living with OCD, because it was constant in the past. I used to do auditions, I used to be in music videos, I used to do background acting, and then I wanted to transition into, principal acting. And I had interviews lined up with several agencies. And my mind convinced me not to go. No matter how hard I've worked, all of a sudden, because my brain said you can't do it, you're going to make a fool out of yourself, just don't do it. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your money, it's not going to go anywhere. And so I don't do it. Yet every year, I wish I had done it, right? And I never understood why I was stopping myself from doing the things that I'm passionate about. And there it was. It's a very, very hard thing to live with, right? Mental health disorders. And at some point I was also depressed. Did it cure it? I don't know if cure is the right term, but dealing with my OCD allowed me to see why I was depressed, allowed me to really understand my depression better. And it actually helped me deal with it. Because being diagnosed with OCD forced me to take better care of myself. It forced me to want to love myself more, something I know I never did. And if you ask me now, do I love myself? I actually really do. My actions showed it before I even knew it. And I want to say the same to you guys. You may not know it yet, but when you look back on your journey, you might actually realize all this time you've been taking such great care of yourselves. You just never were able to acknowledge it because of how tired you are, because of all the things that's happening all at once, and you haven't been able to just take a step back and just appreciate all the things you do for yourself. That's definitely why I wanted to do this episode. It's been 4 years, and not once have I celebrated the fact that I am now able to do the things that I used to do. I just finished watching a horror movie with my roommate, and I would normally avoid movies with demonic possessions because I'm religious, right? I'm Catholic. I grew up like that. Like, I have a great relationship with God, I think. Right? So again, my OCD preys on that. One of the constant, fears I have is, what if I'm possessed? One time, I was working a few weeks ago at Starbucks, and a priest came in. And I couldn't stop looking at the priest. And I started having a panic attack. And I was like, why? Oh my God. Am I possessed? Is something inside me that doesn't want to see the priest? And the priest was interacting with me, and I was, okay. Called out his name. I was on bar. Father Raphael. I was like, here you go. Have a great day. I was fine. The moment he left, I stopped panicking. My OCD brain, my intrusive thoughts, tried to put a lot of meaning towards that interaction. You did this because you're scared of it. You're scared of seeing a priest of da-da-da-da. And I took it another way. I have desensitized myself from a lot of things. Grabbing a knife, hanging out with people, drinking, being intimate, watching horror movies, right? I am now desensitized to these things so that when my intrusive thoughts, try to bother me about them, merp, merp. That's what I do actually sometimes. I'm like, merp, merp, okay. It really does work. Like, my therapist really told me that. And I suggest you do the same, guys. But what's the one thing I'm not desensitized to? I don't go to church. I go to online mass. So why am I not afraid of a priest online, right? There's still a priest. I'm still seeing them. I told my therapist this, and he was kind of like, he was like, oh, ever thought about maybe why you had that reaction? And I was like, it's because I'm possessed. It's like, no. Sometimes your negative intrusive thoughts associates, people with certain things, right? So for them, it's like, sometimes what do they symbolize, right? They symbolize, their disapproval of people like me who are in the LGBT community. That's number one. But then the second one would really be, I just don't see fucking priests all the time. I used to be afraid of seeing a stylist for my hair. I see the same stylist over and over and over again, right? Because, that's what you do with stylists. You try to keep them because they're great. And when I couldn't go to him, I went to somebody else. And it was just me and her. And I started having panic attacks. Not like full on, like I was able to control it, right? But inside. Because my intrusive thoughts were like, ooh, saying things. And it's because I don't know this person. And I've never been in this place. I've never been in this setting. So of course I'm going to have a panic attack because I'm not used to it. And my intrusive thoughts are like, something that are like new scenarios that I haven't been able to desensitize myself from. In the moment, yeah, it was scary. But I know, deep down, I know what was going on. So the moment I left, I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to book another session with her. I did. Similarly, it happened, but, the intensity of the of that feeling of anxiety, or the intensity of the anxiety, which wasn't as bad. And it's because I started getting used to it. This is why exposure therapy works. It familiarizes you with things and lets you understand that, hey, you're actually in a safe space. And you have control over yourself. And these are just thoughts. It's a lot to take in, I know. But it's so important for me to share this with you guys. Especially with my past few episodes about relationship, it feels like I'm just lecturing everybody. I'm really not, right? I just want the best for everybody. And I realize, it's been so long since I've been able to speak about things like these. And a lot of you who are listening right now might identify with this and realize, shit, I may not have OCD, but, maybe the intrusive thoughts are pointing me to something else with my situation. And for those of you listening who are on this journey already of recovery, I don't even want to say recovery because you can never get rid of OCD. I don't want to say recovery. When you're in this journey of taking your life back, I like that better. You got to take your life back, right? Because you still have to live despite what you're going through. You can't let this affect your happiness. And it will try. But you have the ability to make that choice. You can be unhappy about this situation, but if you're happy about a lot of other things, focus on that. It's not disregarding this. You're just simply focusing on what's actually important. And your happiness is the most important thing ever. We are out of time. This has been great. Thank you so much for listening. I know my episodes have been short lately. I kind of like it. I feel like it's easier to listen to. And if ever I need to talk more, there's always going to be a part 2 and things, right? But thank you so much for being here, guys. Please don't forget to be compassionate, to be kind, to love other people as much as you'd love yourself. And if you don't love yourself, then love yourself first. Try to learn from how people love you. And if you say that people don't love you, well, are you sure it's not your intrusive thoughts trying to tell you these things? Anyways, this has been Steven Diego. This is Breaking Down the Breakdown. Thank you so much. If you want to be a guest on the show, just message me on Instagram, Breaking Down the Breakdown Pod, or email me breakingdownthebreakdown@outlook.com. Thank you so much. I will see you guys next week. I love y'all. Happy birthday to me. Okay, bye.